Good morning from Vietnam, Dan. Thanks a lot for spending your afternoon, your evening with us and sharing your stories in our Inside Sharing show. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, we want to say thank you for your generosity.
Sure, it's great to be with you.
And as I shared with you earlier, please accept our invitation for you and your husband to travel and come to Vietnam. So if you decided to go here, then please let us know. I'll make sure that my family will stay and take you guys around town, okay?
That sounds great.
And then in our culture, it's very honor for our audience if we can have you to do a little introduction about who you are and the works that you do. Could you please do that for us?
Sure. Well, basically, I'm an author, and I've done that for the last 3 decades, and actually more than 3 decades I've been writing. But because of the writing, I get a lot of invitations to speak and do keynotes here and there. And I had a training company that actually developed because of the writing. So when I'm acting as a consultant, I work with organizations to help them communicate clearly, and I work with individuals to help them increase their presence and extend their influence, sometimes just personally one-on-one, and sometimes with a published book.
Well, then, in this conversation, we're going to exploring the journey that taking you to become an expert in communications. All right, so we need to travel time together. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
All righty. Let's travel time. When I was very, very young, I was a kid. I wanted to become an astronaut. So wearing the suit and jumping in different planets, it seems cool to me. But life did not give me any opportunity doing anything close to what I wanted to be. And so we want to know what Diana dream was when you were young.
Well, actually, I didn't have much of a career dream when I was young because I grew up on a farm. My dad was a tenant farmer, and we were a very small town, rural area, and I really had no idea or picture of what the big world was out there. When I became a junior in high school, 11th grade, we moved to the big city, which is now a part of the DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And so the whole world opened up for me, but I still didn't have any career plans. And then I guess it was when that first book came out that, I'll have to back up a little bit. Where it really started, my husband at that time was suffering from severe mental, I call it depression, but he was in and out of psychiatric hospitals. And so I knew I was going to have to make a living. And so I went to a family friend of mine and I asked, how am I going to make a living? I have 2 small children that I need to be home for. And he said, well, what would you like to do? And I thought, oh, gee, I don't know. I can't. And finally I said, well, I like to write English compositions in high school, but how can you make a living doing that? And he said, oh, no, I didn't ask you how you could make a living. I asked you what you'd like to do. If you like to write, figure out how to make a living at it. So that was a different concept for me. So I literally went to the public library and checked out all of the books in the 800 section. We didn't have Google back then to do that for us, So I checked out all these books, about 50 or 60 books, filled up the back seat of my car, and went home and just read around the clock all about how to write, how to write greeting card verses to romance novels to mysteries to business books. And that's how I got started.
Wow. Well, Diana, so writing seems to be the thing that you really, really loved back then, right? So
yeah.
In your imagination, was you ever thought that, you're going to be a famous author ever?
No, the thought never entered my mind. Now, I will have to say, when I first got excited about it, I thought, gee, all I have to do is I have a card table sitting up in my bedroom and a typewriter back then, not even a computer. I'll just write this big novel, send it off, and the movie version will come out. But that was the dream. That was the funny part of it. But in reality, when I really got down to it, I thought, no, there's no way I'm going to ever sell a book. There's no way I really can get known or even make a living doing this back at that time. I didn't even know an author. I'd never ever met an author. I'd never gone to a big conference or conference center to hear speakers. It was just a whole unknown world. It's just that writing was something I loved to do. And so I said, okay, I've got to make some money. I've got to stay home. My husband's not going to be able to support us. I've got to stay home and figure out a way to make money.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it turned out really, really well for you. I want to bring you to the moment of you writing your first book, because from 0 to 1 is the hardest thing, right? So the first book always is the best memory to remember. So bring us back to that time and tell us how the journey took place for you to writing the first one, though.
Okay. Well, actually, I wrote an article because that seemed to be easier, and you get paid for articles. Now, people put things on blogs and they write and don't get paid for it. But back then, you would send in things to magazines that were really print and paper, ink on paper, and get paid for it. So I sent an article in, and the editor called me and said, "Would you like to turn this into a book?"
Wow.
And I went, "Yeah, sure." And that was for young adults at that point. The article that I had written was how teens can adjust to their parents' move. When they move across the street or across the USA, and they're away from their friends, there are a lot of adjustments that teens make. And sometimes they get really angry at their parents. That was the article. And they said, "Can you make that into a book for parents, how to help their kids make this move?" And I thought, sure. And so that was the first book I wrote. I wrote it really quickly. I do have a system for writing quickly. Once I got that out, before it even was released, I was already starting on a novel and starting on a business book. So I just kept going. And then when they were released, even in the first 2 or 3 years, I had like 3 books released, one in every category, for young adults, for a novel for adults, and a business book.
And then your journey to writing, starting to steer onto communications and having organization and individual to get better at communications, right? So because as a writer, you can choose to write anything in any topic, in any areas, right? But why communications?
Yes. And I kind of kept 2 paths going in my career. After that first book came out, for young adults, Simon & Schuster came to me, their Mesner division of Simon & Schuster, and said, we would like to give you a series. Can you write a whole series of books for young adults? And so I began to do that, and eventually wrote 6 books in that series. And then that first book, a Christian publisher, spiritual publisher, religious publisher, contacted me about that book. And so I wrote that book and started writing a lot of books in the spiritual arena, in the Christian arena. And then at the same time, again, in those first 2 years, when I went on TV, I was doing a lot of television interviews, and clients started to call. And the first book, actually, before it even was released, somebody said, we pay a lady big bucks to come in here to this oil company and teach us how to write, and you're writing a book on that. And so they started inviting me in. And when I did this first TV interview, IBM saw me on that TV and said, can you come up and talk to us about teaching all of our systems engineers and salespeople this? So even before the book came out, while I was doing the pre-publicity, I got leads to do, speaking and training. So it just all kind of snowballed at once. I was writing in 3 different areas.
Wow. And how do you find time out of your busy schedule of training, of speaking, and still having time to write, though, Dianna?
Well, I will have to say it is a challenge for particularly for parents when they have small children. After children get up a certain age, they're in school most of the day, and that's not so hard. But I do remember the day when my kids, I would get up at like 5 in the morning and work until they woke up. And then when they were toddlers, and when my daughter wasn't at a nap, or down in her bed for a nap in the afternoon, I would have her on my shoulder, juggling her on my shoulder, trying to keep her asleep while I wrote. And then after I put them to bed at night, I was writing. So that's really a challenge. But I think I was blessed with a mom who is extremely organized. My dad too, but especially my mom. And so I just learned by osmosis, I guess, observing them, how to organize and plan my day and, all the principles. In fact, I even wrote a book that's on productivity called Get a Life that came out years ago. But it was about being organized in your life. So that's helped tremendously.
Yeah, wow, wow. Dianna, bring me back to the moment that you asked your friend, a person that you know, advices on what to do, right? Who's that person?
That happened to be business a business minister at our large church. And
Ah,
he did counseling. And so when I went in to talk to him, I've got to support us. We have no way of making a living here now that my husband's in the hospital. He's the one that gave me that advice. He was a good personal friend and also on staff there at the church.
wow, wow. He gave you the advice really, 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 really good. A lot of people will tell you to go find a job and get a stable income to cover for your family. But
Yeah,
he
and then
asked
they
you,
tell you to go find a then they tell you to go find a hobby. But no, his advice was great when he said find something you love and then figure out a way to make a living at it.
and after years, did you ever come to him and share with him, how that advice affects your life?
Actually, we lost touch. We moved away. He moved away, but I know he's gotten my book, so he knows that advice paid off for me for sure. He was much older, so I don't even know if he's still living, but he did know that I had success in publishing.
Yeah, and then if we bring you back to that moment, you sat down with him asking for his advices, right? And then the statement that he gave you was really, really big statement for a young girl, having to stay home, taking care for your family, and you need to find a source of income. So doing something that you love to do is really, really fulfilling, but it's hard to see the result at the end of the month, like you're going to work for an organization and get paid by the end of the month, right? So that big message was a bit like blurry for a lot of people. So I want to know at that moment what trigger in your head that took you to drive all the way to the library and get tons of book about writing and bring home and read them though.
Well, actually, I've left out just a little interlude that was really the motivator, that really gave me the courage to
Yeah.
make this change. And that is when my husband was in the hospital and when I knew I had had this conversation with him. I had an organization that contacted me and asked me if I would like to write for them. And that would be a paid assignment. Not most of the time you just write a book and you hope you get paid. You hope people buy it. But back then they were going to actually pay me for this series of curriculum. And I was teaching school, doing some substitute teaching to make ends meet while he was in the hospital. And I said, I want to go do that assignment, but I can't do that because they want to do some training and you have to go to a conference. And now I'm working full time. And how can I, teaching school? How can I do that? And so I stayed awake for like 3 nights. I did not sleep. I was so stressed about our future for the family. And so I got up, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I got my Bible. I walked into my family room. I sat down and I think, God, I have to have an answer. I'm going to go crazy here if I don't have an answer. And I feel like it was just this clearest thought as a bell. Write, quit your job and write. And it was such a strong feeling, such a strong thought that I thought, this is it. I'm going to do this. And so I went into school the next morning to my principal and I said, look, I want to start. This was like in November, late November. And I said, I want to offer my resignation at midterm, which would have been the middle of January. And he said, oh, no problem. He said, that's kind of routine. We hate to see you go, but just write out your resignation letter. And, I'll present. He said, there happens to be a school board meeting tonight, and I will actually present it at the school board meeting. And so I thought, great. I understand, God, this is my purpose, God's purpose for my life. Everything's cool. And like I said, this was a small town. I'm driving into school the next morning, and I hear they give all this, local news on the radio, and I hear that as I'm driving, it says the local school board met last night in session, and they voted to do this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden they said, and they voted to reject Dianna Booher's resignation. And I thought, I was sure that's what I was supposed to do. I was sure that was my purpose for life. How could this happen? And so I parked the car, I walked into the principal's office, and I said, what happened? You told me it was just routine. If I resigned, they always accepted your resignation. And he said, well, that's generally true, but in your case, the reason they rejected it is we don't have anybody else to teach Spanish. That we have absolutely no applicants, and so they're not going to let you out of your contract. And so, of course, what that meant is I couldn't accept the writing assignment. I couldn't do what I felt was my calling. And so I just stood for another 4 days. 4 days, I thought, what am I going to do? And in 4 days, the principal sends a note to my conference period while I was teaching and said, see me after school. So I go down to his office after school, and he said, guess what? He said, I just had a call from a woman who's looking for a job, and she's moving back to the city to take care of her mom, and she wants to teach Spanish. And so he said, so the bottom line, we're going to let you out of your contract. So I think your question was, what motivated me, what kept going? I think it was knowing that God had a purpose for me. This was my purpose. This was my passion. And just that sort of double confirmation, that I got an invitation to start writing and a paycheck for it, but also that teacher moving back out of the blue in the middle of the year saying to this small school, I want to teach Spanish. Beautiful. So every time I get discouraged when I'm writing, and I think, is anybody going to read this book? I think back to those incidences, and they give me, encouragement and confidence to keep going.
Beautiful. And the purpose of our show is to help people to find their purpose also, Dianna. So back into that 7 days of stress and thinking and stuff, right?
Yes.
Those incidents that happened that you found your calling and you respond really, really proactively to the calling. Is there any way, any sign that you can share that secret to other people? So if they know that there's a calling upon them, they need to listen and respond to that?
Yes, I think there's several ways. In fact, it's been a long time. I used to speak on that occasionally. I haven't done that in a long time, but one of the ways, I call them the 6 Ps, and I can't remember for sure what they all stood for, but one, you need to have a plan. Somehow if you have a calling, you have a plan to get there. And then I called one a plot. You have to have a situation or circumstance that allows you to do what you're doing. One other test is your passion. How passionate are you about doing this? And then I think there are confirmations, praise from other people. When they see you do what you do and it works out well for you, and they see this skill or this talent or this attitude or trait that makes you successful in doing that, you get that. The 4th P, you get a lot of praise. People say, you're really good at this, or you're really great at that, or I appreciate the fact that you do that or think that. And then I think you have peace of mind. Once you know that you're following your calling, the stress goes away because you know that someone other than you, a higher power, in my thinking, it's God, but whatever that in your life you think, but it gives you peace that you are going to be okay, that you're going to be able to make a living from it, and then there's a pathway to get it done. That's the 6th P. I don't think that you're going to have a calling to be an opera singer if you don't have a good voice, So when God calls you to do something, he prepares a path to get there. He prepares the circumstances and a road. And so, like I said, if you think, I want to be an airline pilot, and you're afraid of heights and you can't get over it, or you have an ear, something wrong with your hearing, and that you fail all the tests, that tells you that's not your calling. So he gives you a path to get there. So I think those 6 Ps have always helped me when I'm counseling with other people, when I'm speaking to people who say, how can I find my purpose or my calling, or get in the right job, find the right slot, things that will make me happy in my life. Beautiful. Those are the things I think about.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing the 6 P's, right? So there's the plan, blood, passion, practice, peace of mind, and pathway. And the 6 P's that you're sharing here. And Dianna, I want to understand the journey as a writer, an author, to become a consultant. That is, to the public speaking and into a consultant. It takes a lot of different strength and skill sets
A
and
different network,
yeah,
different people you have to know. Yeah.
yeah. So how did you do it so beautifully? Can you share that secret?
Well, I'll have to say it was because I hated to market. And that is, I was having lunch with an engineer, happened to be vice president of engineering for a major oil company. And we were just having lunch after Sunday after church, and he said something about, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm doing some writing. And he got up, pulled a book off his shelf, and he said, this book, he said, we pay a lady to fly in here. That was I was in Houston. He said, we pay a lady to fly in here from Atlanta to teach all of us engineers to write, do technical writing and business writing. We can't write. And I thought, I know how to do that. I could teach them how to do that, and I could make more money doing that. And so I wrote a book. I asked some friends to give me samples of business writing in all different industries, and I wrote a book on that. And very quickly, it took me 4 days to write that book.
Wow.
And sent it off. And then my agent was able to sell it. She had gotten the book. I got an agent because of the first books on for young adults. And so that was my marketing plan. I couldn't imagine calling up people, calling, people I didn't even know. It's like, I come out and talk to you. So my plan was to become an author, well known enough that calls would come to me. So when the book came out, while I was waiting, for the publisher to bring it out, I called on businesses and I said, here's my name. This is what I do. I have a book on such and such. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it will be released. And then, of course, after it came out, I said, it has been released. Could I come out and talk to you about teaching your employees this? And they said, sure, we need help. And like I said earlier, I was mentioning the Houston Chronicle did a huge story on me, on the business, that I was teaching business writing and people had trouble with their writing. And I'd had no employees, and I didn't even have, cell phone like we have today. I had an answering service, and I called in at noon, and she said, I don't know what you did, but you have had 32 calls this morning for companies wanting you to come out and talk to them.
Beautiful.
And so that really was my marketing plan. And I started calling on those companies, and the first client I had was an oil company who passed my name to another oil company who passed my name to another oil company. And so being in Houston, I was working for all the major oil companies, and then the book did actually come out, 3 or 4 months later. And IBM saw me on the TV show that I already mentioned, and so I thought, oh, that's a new industry. Well, maybe I could do that. And so I started working for IBM, and then I just, branched out and got into the financial industry and started hiring people. I got so many leads so quickly that I couldn't do them. I had all days booked. And so when IBM finally got convinced, yes, you can certainly do this for all our people, they said, can we give you 60 days next year? And I went, I don't have 60 open days. I'm totally booked for the year. So I thought, I don't want to lose clients. I have got to hire people. So at that point, I hired an assistant, and I started hiring other trainers to go out and do my programs. And that was actually in the first 4 years of business. The rest of the time, I was the content creator. I pretty much stayed behind my PC writing the books. I would see what's a problem in industry. What do people need a solution for? What are my clients complaining about? And when they come to the workshops, and I developed the material, then I developed a training program on it and trained other people to go out and actually deliver the programs. And then I would do the speaking. If it was a major conference, 5,000 people, then I would go, do a brief little overview, sort of an intro. But if they wanted sustained learning for their employees, then I sent my consultants in to do, multi-day programs.
Beautiful. So Dianna, when people say that it's important in our success is a luck factor, and I think luck also plays a little role in your journey. But majority of the success comes from the intentions. So you intentionally wanted to become well-known author. like you say earlier, so that people will come to you for businesses instead of you coming to them asking for businesses. And along the
Yes,
way, yeah.
let me interrupt you here for just a minute. And in our U.S. culture, basically, if you're going to be well known to generate calls, you have to be a movie star, a pro athlete, or an author.
Uh-huh.
And so that's the reason I can't throw a football, so I couldn't be an athlete. I don't have any acting talent, so I couldn't be a movie star. So I just thought being an author gets your work out there so that people call you. And so it really was sort of the lazy person's marketing plan.
I want to know what message you talk to yourself every single day back then to make sure that you're going to stick with that plan to become a well-known author, though.
I think I never talked to myself about I want to be a well-known author. That
Oh.
never entered my mind after that first meeting I had when somebody was saying this is
Mm.
people are calling me, and I thought, how do I do this? How do I not market? But what I was, and then looking back later, I know that that's how people get inbound calls. That people were saying you need to get inbound calls. But I think what I was really thinking about is I love working with people. I love teaching them a skill. I mean,
Ah.
I've just always been a teacher at heart. When I write something, I know how to explain it well.
Mm.
And I just love seeing the light bulb come on for people.
Mm.
Even when I was 30 years old, I was in front of a workshop in training, doing classes and programs for 65-year-old executives, who had been on the job for years. And they didn't really have an efficient way to do certain farm letters that they send out. They didn't have an efficient way to do an audit report or an engineering report or a feasibility study. And just being able to teach them and seeing the light bulb go on, and they think, wow, we should train everybody to do this. This is going to save us hours of reading time as executives when they're reading and approving things. That's what really motivated me. It wasn't so much from the beginning, I'm going to be famous. It was, I want to do something I feel passionate about. I want to do something that I can make a good living at, but I also want to help people do what they want to do. And so by doing the programs and on communication, because I've always been under that communication umbrella, communication expertise, it changes everything. If you think of every relationship you've ever had, family, social, business, it's all your conversations stacked end to end.
Wow.
So if you can communicate better, then you can do anything you want. And that was my goal, is to help people communicate. So basically, out of all the 49 books that I have written, half of them have been on communication, because that opens the door for everyone else.
Yeah. And I noted down here that you really listen to your clients to figure out what bothered them, what the problems they are facing with, so that you can write something, that you can create something that helping them solve the problems. And the problem solving mindset is really really inside of you, embedded into your thinking in your body. And we want to know the secret that can help Diana to be able to be a better listener, so that other people will share with you their problems now.
Yeah, I don't think anyone ever masters listening. I think we can
Mm.
all get better to listening. Um, Even though I've been studying this for more than 3 decades, and
Mm.
my husband also, he quit his job after about 10 years and joined me. I had remarried, and he joined me in the business. Uh, a funny thing that happened that illustrates the point about not listening, no matter how much you want to listen or know to listen. When I write a book, I work at my home office, and he came in one evening and he walked down the hall right past me, and I said, wow, it's really raining hard. My parents live about 30 minutes away in
Mm.
Arlington, where the Texas Cowboys play their games, so everybody's heard of that place. And I said, wow, it's really raining hard out there. My dad just called and said that they've gotten 2 or 3 inches. He said, oh. He walked past. About 10 minutes later, he comes back down the hall and he says, why don't you call your dad and see if it's raining over there? And of course, I think I just told you that we, no matter how much we study and we read and we know we should listen, we don't always listen. But when it comes to customers, I have, I think, done a good job of that because, I would be when I was working in certain companies, I might be with those attendees for 2 days or 4 days in some cases. And I hear them complain about things. And it's always my boss doesn't listen, or I can't get good feedback on my job, or writing is taking me too long, or we've got a major conflict because everybody's got a political agenda. And I just begin to, those are all communication things. They're all communication things. So helping them and seeing real application in their job motivated me.
Beautiful.
As part of my thinking, how can I help them? And I've got a concrete problem here that sure needs a solution. And so that gave me the impetus to tackle the next thing and the next topic and the next topic and the next book.
Wow. And since we're on the talk for listening, might you share any tips that can help us to become better listeners?
I think this is going to sound simplistic, but I would say decide you want to listen. A lot of times people say things to us and it's just like noise. It's background noise because our mind is on something else. And I find that's true of myself. Somebody comes in and starts to say something and I'm in the middle of an email. I've gotten where I used to sometimes just say, yeah, okay. And I acted like I was listening, but I really was focused on that email. So now I'm in the habit for the last, 2 decades or so to say, excuse me, can you hold that just a moment? I'm not listening. Let me finish. And I would write a sentence, finish my thought and then turn back to that person to listen. So making up your mind that you intend to listen is the most important thing. I think clarifying. A lot of times we jump to assumptions about what somebody's saying. They give us a piece of information and we think, oh, so their point is, and that's not their point at all. So if you can get to the habit of saying, is what you're trying to tell me that you'd like me to do X, or are you trying to tell me that you're not happy with your job and you want to switch to a different role? I try to clarify. And sometimes it's right. Sometimes the conclusion I drew about what they said is wrong. And so making sure that you question and verify the conclusion you're drawing about what they say is another good listening tip, habit.
Beautiful. So first we have to decide that we're going to listen, right? And then along the way, asking questions to make sure that we understand what the other person say. Are we having the right understanding about that, or we need to have some adjustments or so?
Particularly that's important when you're giving directions as a manager, as an executive, when you delegate a project. If you say, people are in the habit sometimes of saying, do you follow me? Or are you with me? Or is that clear? Well, nobody's going to say, no, I'm stupid. I don't understand. Nobody says that. They always nod and act like, sure, I understand. So what you have to do as a speaker is to take responsibility yourself by asking some questions to say something. Let's say you've delegated a project, and as the executive, then you take the responsibility and say, as you get this done, what 2 or 3 steps do you think you will be taking, or where do you think you're going to start on this project, or what's a reasonable timeline to get this done? And by their answers, then you, the speaker, can determine if they really understood. Because they don't know that they don't understand. They don't know that they're on a different wavelength than you. So it's really, as a speaker, it's your responsibility to question and make sure they understand, and don't just let them say, oh yeah, sure, I understand, or it's clear, when it may not be.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Dianna. My last question, is about the advices, so that we can, and our listeners can reflect and learn and can apply, so that they can get better at certain things. And throughout our conversation, that's the 3 things that I think that that really that people will really need advices from you. One is in the writing, one is in the communications, and one is in the speaking. Okay, so I will leave the 3 for you to decide which kind of area you want to narrow down next. So to give advice to our listeners, which one would you choose?
Actually, I would say speaking, but not necessarily speaking and writing are so related. It's not necessarily what you say, although I do coach people in presentation skills. I've done that for many years, many clients. But now to reach the world, you have to write.
Yeah.
You have to write, to whether it's on social media, just a comment, or whether you are writing reports. You can do your job over in the corner and do it with excellence. But if nobody knows about that and the word doesn't get out, you don't expand your influence. So I think eventually, even though you may speak well, you have to write it so that it's like I said, it's on social media, or it's a blog, or it's an article, or it's some kind of research paper or white paper, or a book, which gets more attention. I mean, nobody throws a book away. You get mail, you throw it away. You get a brochure, you throw it away. But when you get a book from someone, you don't toss that away. It's a free book.
Yeah.
And it's your advice and your thinking. And there are many executives who have solved a problem in their company, and they've done a great job. Or maybe it's an entrepreneur who started their own business and they figured out a way to do it well and profitably and productively. When you write that down, you dramatically expand your influence. And also, again, it's a good marketing ploy. So I encourage people to improve their writing so that they could write a book if they wanted to, and get the word out. And it's as profitable, you get paid for it, but it also builds your business, it builds your career, it builds your visibility, it gets you in the media. You sell foreign editions and it gets in every country. So there's really nothing that can expand your presence and sell your products and your services better than a published book.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Dianna. So we will take a baby step first. So how, in order for us to write a book, then we have to be better at writing, right? So how can we take baby steps to get better at writing?
Well, there are all kinds of books on writing. I mean, I have several online. I have a book called E-Writing, and I have a grammar book out there. So I have books on that, and I teach that. I actually have a book. It's called Booher Book, not Boot Camp, but Booher Book Camp, where I teach people how to write. What's involved. It's not. Most of us can't, if we're in the business world and have a professional degree, most of us can write well. We just don't know how, and we think well, and we know how to research. So it's knowing the process. And there's where I go through the process. And so I would say, learn the process. If you want to take baby steps, you can write blogs. And on LinkedIn, there's a LinkedIn e-sign. You can send those out, and if you get a good response and a good following, I know I do one every 2 weeks. I comment on LinkedIn. I have a good post 2 times a week, and then I send out on the third post, I send out a newsletter. That's a baby step. If you get good feedback, people saying, I love those ideas, then learn the process to get your writing a bigger audience. And once you publish the book, you're going to get a lot of reporters call you, and they write articles for you. They're writing the articles based on your interview. And so it really jump starts any business with any product or service to sell. I mean, think about it. The company that's pretty well known around the country, Zappos, for shoes, they wrote about their customer service and their culture. HubSpot, I think it's Blogspot. Their CEO wrote about something. I can't even remember what he wrote about, but it launched their company. There's another book. A lot of people use the project management software Basecamp. That, again, their CEOs wrote a book on that, and it launched their product and the second product, and et cetera. Just put them on the map. So I think the baby steps are to learn the process that's involved and how you submit a proposal, what goes in a proposal. It doesn't have to be long. Sometimes a proposal can be as short as 2 pages. Sometimes it's 40 pages. But learning how to write a proposal, how to get an agent, and then they submit your book. Shop it around just like anything else that you are selling.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Dianna, Thanks a lot for sharing your stories. And then we know your past already. We know the work that you're doing now. Let's travel into the future a little bit, and then we can conclude our conversation from there. Is that okay?
Okay.
Alrighty. So, is there anything that you are working on that are exciting you want to share with me and the audience so we can celebrate with you in advance?
Well, I do a lot of writing for major companies, blog writing, just ongoing. Microsoft, Forbes. I've been writing for Forbes for 3 or 4 years. But a major project. I just finished a book on healthcare, and I was co-authoring that with a doctor, an orthopedic surgeon. Um, so I'm looking for the next book. I'm thinking that I may switch to go back to novel writing. I don't know. I'm just kind of taking a breather since the holidays. I've been thinking about it for the last couple of weeks. I have a list about this long of books ideas that I could do. But really, right now, what I'm really enjoying at this time in my life is coaching other writers. I have other people who are speakers, who consultants, and think I need to build my reputation. So they will frequently call, and sometimes I spend an hour with them, sometimes I spend 2 days with them, or if they come to the book camp, I spend 3 days with them. But I really enjoy helping other people get their message out. And of course, I learn too. When I learn what their ideas are and what their expertise is, it's a fascinating learning experience for me in a topic that I'm not familiar with.
Beautiful.
So that's what I've been doing when I started these book camps. I sold my training company it's been about 3 years now. I sold that training company. So now I am helping other people build their businesses by doing the publishing.
Beautiful, beautiful. So my last question to you is regarding to the word you just mentioned, thinking. All right, and my wife and I have been on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think because we believe that our thinking capability actually is diminishing. And then every chance we talk to experts like you, we will ask this question. And if people listen to your response, they can find something to reflect, to think, to learn, and to apply to their thinking, and hope that they will improve their thinking capability. And that is how the change starts. Okay, so Diana, how have you been expanding your ability to think?
I think that the most frequent way is reading.
Reading.
The more you read, the more you start to ask yourself important, provocative questions like, is this true? How do I know it's true? What other conclusion could I come to besides the conclusion this author is trying to lead me to? What's fact and what's opinion? Just as you read, it improves your thinking process. A second way, other than just reading, I think, is to go to very smart people and ask them questions about what you intend to do, your plan. I wrote a blog once on thinking, how to think better, and one of the points in that was to pretend that you have a board of directors. You may literally have a board of directors to go to, but if you're an entrepreneur and you don't have or you're just starting out and you don't have this group of people, imagine you did. Imagine you were on the board of directors. When somebody would present an idea to you, what would you ask them? What would you ask them about their financing? What would you ask them about their staff? What would you want to know about their plans in the future? What would you want to know about their marketing? If you would think like an advisor and think like you're a person, if you're starting a new project or product or service, what would a board of directors ask me? And then prepare yourself. That helps you to think through any kind of project, any kind of plan that you want to do, even if it's financial planning for your family or planning how to build character into your kids. That thought process comes from reading in many subject areas and applying maybe in different ways, but it also comes from your ability to listen to good advice and listen to feedback and apply it in your situation.
Beautiful, and thank you so much for sharing your tips on how to help us to think better. And Diana, it's been a pleasure to know you, and I'm so grateful for you to decide to join our show and share your amazing journey with our audience. I wish you well. I wish your family all the best in 2023 and in many more years to come. And I look forward to seeing you in Vietnam one day. All right?
Okay. All right. Thank you. I've enjoyed being with you.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Okay.
And say hello to your family for us, okay?
Okay, will do.
Thank you very much. Bye bye for now.